If you remember, in the first lesson we briefly mentioned about the background script and we looked into tab detection. But what is background script or service workers? Well, they are short-lived JavaScript code that lives in the background, so not in the pop-up and not injected into the web page. And they execute JavaScript code until they reach the end of their job and then they terminate. And here are a few of the most common ways how you can start an extension service worker. They can listen to browser events such as tab changes, downloads, or adding a new bookmark. We can also trigger them by the extension lifecycle events such as installing or updating the extension. They can listen to messages that we can programmatically send from the pop-up or injected code on web pages. They can also be triggered by storage changes, or they can listen to context menu events. You can find a list of all the listeners and how to start extension service workers on Google's Chrome extension reference pages. But enough of the theory, let's get into practice. I open my background.ts file, which as you can see already had the tab activated listener. This defined background line comes from wxt, so everything that we put in this function will be added to our final background.ts. This is just how the wxt framework works. So what I want to do is call our change icon function here instead of logging which tab has been activated. Active info.tabid. Now change icon lives right now in the pop-up and we're in the background script, so it's maybe the perfect time to clean up our code a little bit. First of all, I will take this whole function and put it into a util function. And of course, I have some missing dependencies such as node storage, which instead of copying here, I'd rather create a standalone types file so I can access it from other places as well, just in the root of my project. And maybe from the pop-up, I will copy all the types over. And in this case, I also need to export them since I want to access them from the other files. And I also need to export the change icon function. Node storage is unknown, so I should import node storage. All the dependencies are fixed. However, maybe this storage is not imported in this file. Get page key is also used, so just in case I will import them in the change icon file as well, because I was using it here. Then of course, back in my pop-up I have two errors. One is that the change icon has been moved, so let's import it from utils. And the other is that our node storage type is unknown. Let me just import that from the types. Okay, it seems like our pop-up has been cleaned up. Let's go back to our background script, and all I need to do is import the change icon from the util function. Alright, let's give it a spin. Maybe I'll just restart it. And let's add the note on Wikipedia. And I opened a new tab. It didn't clean the icon. But if I click on the newly opened tab later, it does. So what is happening? Well, the thing is that we're only detecting the onActivated, which is when the user lands on a tab and we have the data of it. But there are other tab related events that we need to consider. One is onUpdated, which means that something has changed on the tab, such as the URL changed or some other event. And the other is onRemoved, when we close a tab. So let's start with onUpdated. This is also an async one. It has 3 parameters, info and tab. And we can check if the URL has changed and the tab is active. Changing for pointings what has changed. And tab.active tells us whether the tab is the active one or not, so that we don't care about changes on tabs that are not the open one. And if that's the case, we can again or change icon with tab ID. And just to finish it up, let's add the closing one too, because imagine that we close one tab, then the previous one will be the newly activated. I will add the listener to that too, on removed. But in this case, instead of checking which tab has been removed, that's a totally irrelevant information. So instead, I will query again for the active tab and use this as a reference, just how I did it in the pop-up. If you remember, it looked like this: browser.tabs.query, active true, current window true, and if sorry, it's an async, so I need to wait for it. If tab.id exists, then I can just change the icon for that tab.id. This way, we handled every situation that can happen when we are changing tabs. So let's try again. Again, the icon disappeared. It's a good hint that we need to restart bun dev or npm dev. Add it back. Let's see. wikipedia.org. The icon has changed. I open a new tab. The new tab cleared the icon. youtube.com. Let's add notes. Let's have a third one, for example the web store. And maybe let's see, if I close YouTube, I go to the web store and it indeed cleared the icon. However, we still have an issue, which is that if we have a note here and I delete it, the icon is not resetting to the empty state. That's very easy to fix. I will just go back to the pop-up, and where I set the node data, I do it slightly differently. I check if the node text is indeed empty or not. Node text value.trim. Let's get rid of white spaces too, so I will use trim is empty. And if that is the case, then I just delete the node storage key element. And if it's not empty, then I do what I did and update it in the nodes storage. And in both cases, I update it in the storage. So let's see how it is now. I added some comment, the icon has the content, and I cleaned it, and as you can see, the icon has cleared as well. So we basically cleaned up our code base and handled the icon change no matter which tab we are switching to, and we're also considering more edge cases such as closing a tab. Now we have a good understanding of extension service workers, although we will use them a bit more in the later classes. We managed to update the icon based on the contents of the nodes, so I think our extension is coming along pretty nicely, but of course we still have a lot to do. In the meantime, remember that you can download all source files and learn more about this extension that we're building at webextensiontutorial.com.